Good morning. One of the nicest parts of growing things is being able to cook what you've grown a little bit later. And I find that dried beans are something that I really enjoy cooking and we eat a lot of. Growing enough in my yard to supplement our diet is a real challenge. But last year I did manage to grow enough of my tiger's eye beans so that we have some that we can use for our recipes this winter. Everybody likes to cook their beans differently. I have my way. A lot of people have their opinions about how to cook beans. I'm going to tell you how I do it and why I like it, but you can search online and you'll find 10 different ways of preparing beans. I like to can my beans in advance. So when I cook beans, I usually cook more than I need and then can the extras so that I'll have them for the next couple of weeks. And I don't go through an elaborate canning method. What I do is I bring the whole thing to a boil once it's done, and I'll tell you the whole process in a minute. And I keep it boiling for a while, and then I'll put it into somewhat sterilized jars, and I'll put them in the fridge. And those will last for a couple of weeks in the fridge without going off. That said, this is a very sketchy way of canning, and if you accidentally save them for longer than that, you might end up with something that could cause some problems. You can get botulism, you can get other problems in beans that are not canned properly. So I don't really advocate doing it this way. It's just the way that I do it because generally we have had no problems putting them in the fridge like this, and they will save for a while for us. But once again, this is kind of on the don't try this at home end of the spectrum. So, however, my preparation for beans beyond that is a definitely try this at home if you want to save some energy and if you want to have some beans for the next week or so. So what I do is first I soak the beans overnight. Now this is sort of very old school. Everybody loves their Instapot these days. I don't have one. We have solar electricity, so I do everything that I can to reduce our electric consumption. And soaking my beans overnight and not using an Instapot is very helpful for that. Second, once they are soaked overnight, you drain the water and you put them on the stove in fresh water. The reason that you change water with your beans is because they can contain some types of alkaloids. I talked about alkaloids yesterday, actually, in my the lupini bean video. Ordinary beans don't have as much of these compounds as lupini beans. In fact, it's debatable whether or not they have enough to cause any problems. But that said, better safe than sorry. Change your water. Put them on the stove, and this is after they've been soaked overnight, and bring them to a boil. Now, I tend to do this in a large stock pot generally. The pictures that I have here are a smaller one because I'm actually cooking a smaller amount of these beans. They're my homegrown beans, and so I'm probably gonna not use them all at once. If I decided to cook them all at once, then who knows, I might not get around to eating them, and I really, really don't want to waste the homegrown beans. So I have a big stock pot usually, and I will fill that with water. One of the reasons for a big stock pot is because this will retain more heat for a while, especially if you wrap it. So what I do is I bring everything up to temperature and up to a boil, and once it's boiled for a minute or two, I will put some pot holders on top of it. I will wrap it around, like you might have seen me do with my yogurt making process. Wrap it around with kitchen towels and that sort of thing. Just sort of insulate it. And I'll let it sit there for three hours or so. After 3 hours, I will refresh the water, bring it to a boil again, and then cover it again. So this is kind of like cooking it in a crock pot, except no electricity. And this allows me to cook the beans, depending on the type of beans. Sometimes it only takes one session of like 3 hours. Sometimes it takes 2 to 3. But like all good things, one plans in advance for cooking dry beans. Now, there is some debate out there about the flavor of beans if you have replaced the water, like I'm talking about. They say that the flavor is better if you cook it in one without changing the water. So basically, without refreshing it, and that may very well be true. I think it probably is. However, there's the alkaloid thing to consider, and so I don't. I do refresh the water. If it weren't for the alkaloids, I probably wouldn't bother with that. Also, though, when you refresh the water and bring it back to a boil, there's less of a chance of it boiling over, because once it's got all of that bean juice in the liquid becomes it becomes thicker, and it boils over a whole lot more easily. So you really have to keep your eye on it when you're doing that quick boil, and then once you cover it, obviously you don't have to think about it too much at all. So once I have done that boiling process a couple of times, then I will add salt and let it sit in the water with the salt. Now, if I'm going to eat the beans soon, then it's okay if they just sit on the stove. If I'm going to can them for a short time, like I described earlier, then the salt can actually help a little bit in keeping everything safe. So I over salt them a little bit. The understanding is that the salt will seep into the beans. I say the understanding. I mean, this is the fact of the matter is the salt will seep into the beans, and the liquid itself, even though it tastes salty, a little saltier than you might want initially, once it's soaked into the beans, it actually kind of reaches a state of equilibrium, and it's not as salty as you would think. Now, I'm not even telling you how much salt I add, but probably at least a teaspoon per quart of water, and sometimes more, just depending on my mood. Crazy, but I don't always have exact recipes for everything. So then I can choose to either eat them, within the next, 24 hours, or I can choose to, like I say, put them into jars, boil it, and when it's boiling, I put it into sterile-ish jars and put it in the fridge. And like I say, going from, and actually I'll let it sit out for a little while before I put it in the fridge. You don't want to put a super hot jar in the fridge. You might crack it, or you might crack your fridge shelf or something by putting something so hot there. So let it cool down a little bit on the counter, and then once it's cooler, put it in the refrigerator, and it will last for a little while. No telling exactly how long it will last, so probably best to use it up within a week. Might last longer, but then you start doing dangerous things like I like to do. So probably not the best advice for me to be giving you about cooking your beans. There's also debate about whether or not you should bother to soak your beans. I soak my beans in advance for a few reasons, one of which is that whole alkaloid thing. Helps water leaches out alkaloids, and so it's a good extra step for that purpose. Second, the beans start to germinate when they are soaked. They're coming alive. Now, this is totally not something that I have looked into scientifically, but my gut says that if you boil a bean when it's rock hard, you just boil it from that point, you're not going to have as much nutrition as if you let it germinate, because almost every seed, when it germinates, it creates more nutrient value. I say that. I have no idea if that's true. That's what I've heard. And so it doesn't cause me any real extra effort to put the beans in the night before I'm going to cook them. So there's that germination thing, which is pure speculation on my part. There is the fact that they do cook a little bit faster if you soak them in advance. And I'm not really sure how my quick boil and then let them sit method would work if I didn't soak them in advance. Maybe I should try that sometime and get back to you. But if you cook them on the stove, if you boil beans on the stove, you'll get a little bit of a faster cook time if you have soaked them in advance. Some people say it's only saving 10 minutes. Well, if that's 10 minutes and you're actually cooking them, like boiling them the entire time, then you've saved 10 minutes worth of gas or 10 minutes worth of electricity. It doesn't cost you anything except putting them in 8 to 12 hours earlier and letting them soak. So those are the methods that I use for cooking dry beans. I do this all the time. Every week we soak something and we turn it into burritos or tacos or beans and rice or some other, baked beans, some other bean recipe. So we're always eating beans, and this is how I do it. When I was first starting to cook, I used to use canned beans. And there's nothing wrong with canned beans, except they're about like 5 times more expensive. So why waste the money? If you can work it into your day, soak your beans, boil your beans, and if you do it the way that I'm talking about, it really doesn't take that much. It takes timing. It takes a little bit of strategy to get them done on time, but really it's just setting the timer. You put them in the evening, they soak. The next morning you boil it, set the timer for 2 or 3 hours, and check the temperature. Boil it again, takes you another 10 or 15 minutes, and set the timer again for 2 or 3 hours. Hey, we're all at home right now. We're working from home, and some of us, like me, are unemployed. So we have a little extra time, and so why not spend that time cooking good food the old-fashioned way? Put that Instapot back in the cupboard for a while, save some electricity, and try it, see how you like it. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I hope you enjoyed this. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Please give me a thumbs up, drop some comments down on the bottom. Let me know what you think and how you... That is my bean timer. Drop some comments down below, and please take a look at foodforestgardenclub.org, where we get together every couple of weeks. We are on Zoom chats, and we have a forum. We have all my videos are posted there, and other great stuff. We actually have a contest going on right now for anybody who joins the club in February. Can win the very first club t-shirt to be printed. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have an awesome day.